Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'll be moving new clause 1, 2, 3 and speaking to amendments 67 to 69 tabled in my name. It's now 124 days since the Chancellor delivered the first Labour budget in 14 years, the so-called growth budget. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it feels like longer. Inflation is up, taxes are up, borrowing is up, unemployment's up, energy bills are up. I could go on, but most tellingly of all, growth is down. The Bank of England has just cut its growth forecast for this year in half to just only 0.75%. Little wonder that business confidence has plummeted, with firms warning of fewer jobs, lower wages and higher prices. And instead of backing risk-takers and supporting wealth creators, as we on this side of the House do, this is a finance bill and a budget that attacks enterprise, delivers lower growth, higher borrowing and higher taxes. I'll turn now to new clause number 1, Madam Deputy Speaker, concerning pensioners. Millions of pensioners were left out in the cold this winter when the government took away their winter fuel payments. Now millions only in receipt of the state pension face paying income tax on it. I would happily give way.
I'm grateful for the Shadow Minister giving way. When the government decided to take away the winter fuel payments, one of the things they said was you could go for pension credit to try and get some support. The problem is there are huge delays in getting pension credit. When it was first put out, it was 84 days. 500 new staff have been brought in, but it's still 56 days above the 50-day limit that's supposed to be there. Does he share my concerns? This is the problem, that these people are now passed through winter and still don't have the funds that they're entitled to under this government, and they're not there.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, who's done stellar work in drawing those delays and the waiting times to get that data out of the department. And of course we know if everyone who took up pension credit who's entitled to it did so, that would wipe out the savings that the Chancellor wanted. So the idea that she wanted all of those people to take up pension credit, I think, is for the birds. So this amendment would require the government to review how many people receiving the new state pension at the full rate will be liable to pay income tax in the coming years. In the general election, we were very clear that people only in receipt of the state pension should not pay income tax on it. However, recent forecasts suggest that an estimated 9 million pensioners will pay income tax on their state pension from April 2026. Pensioners can't easily alter their financial situation, yet they were given just 6 months' notice that they would be losing their winter fuel allowance, so they cannot be blindsided for a second time by the taxman. At the committee, the Minister said the data on this was available, but I don't think that is correct, because the figures he referred to do not break down the cohort, the group that we're talking about here, recipients of the full rate of the new state pension. So will he commit to publishing data on how many people receiving the new state pension will pay income tax on it? And this potential hit could not come at a worse time for pensioners, having lost the winter fuel payments. We learned last week that energy bills are going up yet again, far cry from the £300 cut that they were all promised at the last election by the party opposite. And Madam Deputy Speaker, at the budget, the Chancellor also made much of her announcement that she would uprate the personal tax thresholds in line with inflation from 2028. However, that is not legislated for in this bill, and the public are being asked to take the government at face value. Yet recent reports suggest this promise may be dropped, given the impact of the budget on growth and higher borrowing. So given the number of broken promises we've seen since the election, can the Minister reconfirm from the dispatch box the government's commitment to unfreeze those thresholds in 2028? And as well as pensioners, it's working people that cannot afford the cost of this Labour government. Working people that the Prime Minister promised at the election he would not hit with higher taxes, and then broke that promise with the £25 billion a year jobs tax. I happily give way.
Mr Osborne.
Can I thank my right honourable friend? Can he just confirm which government it was that left taxes at a 70-year high, and also which government led to interest rates at a record high and inflation at a record high that stung so many mortgage holders?
James Wilde.
Well, the last government had to deal with a global pandemic and an energy price shock. But I'm happy to enlighten the honourable gentleman who also hasn't read the Red Book. Taxes are going up They're going up to record high levels under the budget and this finance bill that he is supporting. So if he's worried about the tax burden, then he shouldn't be voting for this finance bill today. And households are facing financial challenges, and the measures in this bill will only make things worse. The OBR predicts that real household disposable income will fall by 1.25% by the start of 2029, largely due to the measures in the budget. So new Clause 3 requires the Chancellor to publish an assessment of the impact of the changes on household finances. It's the choices that this Chancellor and this government have seen that means borrowing is increasing, meaning interest rates will be higher for longer, people's mortgages will be higher, and see hard-working families paying billions of pounds to pay off the debt interest. The government inherited inflation at target. Since then, inflation's gone up, meaning less money in people's pockets. And while it's the Chancellor's wider mishandling of the economy that's attracting the headlines, the measures in this bill will have a direct role in squeezing households. Whether it's higher stamp duty, increased alcohol duty, air passenger duty, capital gains increases, vehicle excise duty, or changes to the tax treatment of hybrid vehicles and many other measures in this bill, the costs of this bill will be felt directly by households across the UK. And when households are stretched, it's essential we have transparency about what the actions of the government is taking are doing to their incomes. Give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Of course, the big measure in the budget on tax raising was, as my honourable friend says, the national insurance contributions rise, 25 billion impact on the economy. And yet, once you've taken off compensation for the public services and the negative impact on activity, it only nets about 10 billion. It's a peculiarly ridiculous policy that nets only 10 billion or 11 billion, and yet, according to the OBR's numbers, takes 19 billion out of people's pay packets. Surely, does my honourable friend agree, there has never been a more ridiculous measure that costs so much and delivers so little?
James Wilde.
Well, I think my honourable friend makes the point that this measure may have been introduced by a Chancellor who didn't actually understand the impact that it was going to have, and actually they should have stuck to the promise they made at the election not to increase national insurance at all. I turn to new Clause 2 concerning the government's plan to undermine our energy security by increasing the energy profits levy to 38%, bringing the headline rate on oil and gas activities to 78%, extending the tax by a year and removing investment allowances. And the consequences? Fairly predictably. Offshore Energies UK has said that the hike will choke off billions of pounds of investment in the North Sea, putting 35,000 jobs at risk. I give way to the honourable member.
Does my honourable friend not agree that if such a rate is good enough for Norway, a clean energy superpower, is it not good enough for the United Kingdom?
In short, no, I don't, and that's why we voted against it previously. We should be maximising our homegrown energy, not undermining domestic production, and choosing to rely instead on importers with higher carbon emissions.
I agree entirely with the Shadow Minister. Isn't the point the Prime Minister has come to this dispatch box only today to talk about how economy is security. Security starts with our defence and looking after ourselves, including energy security, as the question came. So isn't it ridiculous to not use our North Sea oil, our own reserves, to make sure we have that security, the cleaner side of oil and gas too, as well as the jobs, all without importing it in a volatile world?
James Wilde.
Absolutely. I wonder if when the Prime Minister was in Washington last week, he had the opportunity to talk to President Trump about homegrown energy and the importance of supporting your domestic sector. And that's what we on the side of the House certainly support, because this is a sector that has 200,000 high-skilled jobs. So it's important that we have an up-to-date assessment of the impact of what the government's doing on our domestic energy production, energy security, energy prices and the UK economy. And unfortunately, we're already seeing some of the impact. The US firm Apache has already said that it will end its operations in the North Sea by the end of 2029, blaming the increase and extension of the profits levy for making that uneconomic beyond that. And as members will rightly...
I'm so grateful to my honourable friend, because the absurdity of this is it's vying with the national insurance contributions change to be the most absurd measure. And I think by a head it wins, because we have a Prime Minister saying we must have energy security. We've got a climate change committee that says we'll still need oil and gas for 25% of our energy needs if we meet net zero in 2050. and they will have no more licences. So we lose tens of thousands of jobs, tens of billions of tax, and the very engineering capability that we need to have the transition. It's absurd on every single possible front.
My humble friend is 100% correct, and I think we all know the architect of much of this is the Energy Secretary. He takes a rather fundamentalist approach to this and wants to cover farmland with solar farms and wants to undermine our oil and gas sector. We on this side disagree, and it was the previous government who introduced this levy in the first place, but that was to tackle extraordinary profits at an extraordinary time, and the revenue helped to keep energy bills lower for all of our constituents. But now the government is ratcheting up the levy and seems to want to tax North Sea exploration out of existence. And this is just a further example of the government's ill-conceived energy policy with GB Energy and net zero vanity project that won't generate any energy or be an energy supplier and certainly won't deliver £300 off bills. The final amendment 67 to 69 tabled in my name would remove clause 47 and abolish Labour's education tax. Since the 1st of January, independent school fees for education and vocational training have been subject to VAT at 20%. The first time that education has been subject to VAT. And why is that? Because education is a public good, so we do not tax it. And putting VAT on independent schools particularly hurts those on the most modest incomes who've chosen to save and make sacrifices to send their children to a school that they think will serve them best. I give way to.
Thank you, Shadow Minister, for giving way. It's one of the issues later on I'd like to make a comment on. We have a number of faith schools in Northern Ireland who will be impacted greatly by these fees, and they have contacted me even at this late stage to ask would government reconsider that point. Does he agree that the faith schools will be impacted more than perhaps others, and the impact on the parents and the children in particular will be gross?
James Wild.
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend on that point, and obviously everyone will have an opportunity, if this amendment is moved and selected for a vote to strip this measure out of the bill. And none of those parents on modest incomes are getting a tax break. They're also contributing to fund places in the state sector, whether or not they take them up. Ultimately, this is a tax on aspiration, and it's one we oppose. And at committee, we raised the concerns about the impact on certain groups, including children with special educational needs, small schools, faith schools, and indeed military families. I'll give way to my friend.
Grateful to my honourable friend, who's been very generous, and he's just touched on the issue of children with special educational needs, because this isn't just about scrimping parents making a choice. This is about people with no choice. People whose children have been bullied, who have other special needs that just haven't been met in the state sector and have made the sacrifice to go in the private sector. And those people with children in particular need are going to pay the price of this ill-thought-through measure.
Well, once again, my honourable friend is consistent in being absolutely right. And the point is that there are more than 100,000 pupils in independent schools with SEND who do not have an education, health and care plan. So I'm not sure if the honourable lady knows, but they will have to pay VAT on those places. That is not covered by the government. I give way to the honourable member.
Can I thank my honourable friend for giving way? Is it not true, however, that SEN students are exempt in this proposal?
Yes, they are.
And is it not a surprise? Is it not a surprise that whilst the opposition is focused on this, the very small number that go to independent schools, we are focused on ensuring that we have good education for the large majority of our children in state schools?
James Wild.
I'm afraid the honourable gentleman is flat wrong. Children with SEND who do not have an education, health and care plan, who go to an independent school, have to pay the 20% VAT. So I would hope people who are voting on this legislation may have understood that fairly fundamental point. And that will make those places unaffordable for parents of many, add pressures to the state system with demand for places where there's no capacity, and squeeze council budgets. But this is just another part of the Education Secretary's ideological approach that seeks to divide. We care about all children on this side. We simply believe parents should be able to choose the school that is best for their child. And we're seeing the impact in real time. The government's own estimates suggested there'll be 100 schools closing over the next 3 years. A school in the Prime Minister's own constituency has said it will close this summer due to the impact of VAT as well as the jobs tax. School closures dedicated staff losing their jobs, children having their education disrupted. That's the effect of this policy, and I hope that members will support our amendment today. And Madam Deputy Speaker, on this side of the House, we welcome inward investors, we back wealth creators and risk takers. And as this government is chasing growth, one would think they might be sending a message that Britain is open for business. But the plans for non-DOMs, including inheritance tax, have already caused a significant exodus of investors from the UK. Last year, over 10,000 net millionaires left the country, a 157% increase compared to the year before. That is the equivalent, the Adam Smith Institute estimates, to losing the income tax take of over 500,000 average taxpayers. Now, at Davos, and we discussed this in committee, the Chancellor said she would amend this proposal as they made the UK less attractive. But frankly, the damage is already done. The Chartered Institute of Taxation has warned that with a lack of proper consideration and consultation, the amendments introduced that we're discussing this evening still leave uncertainty which is counterproductive if the intention is to encourage those people to stay and to lay concerns about those looking to invest into the UK.
Luke Evans.
The Shadow Minister is absolutely correct. She said, the Chancellor at Davos said she had listened to that community. Why does she make changes for that community, yet not the farming community or the pensioner community or the pupils at private schools or SEND communities, or indeed those working businesses such as pubs, restaurants, charities who are all seeing tax increases? Why was that community listened to and none others? Does he have an idea of why that could be the case?
James Wilde.
My humble friend invites me to get inside the head of the Chancellor. I'm not sure that I would be able to do that. All I know is that those other groups that he talks about should also be listened to. The Chancellor has shown herself to be timid, particularly on farming and impact on family farms and businesses of those changes. Hence, there is tomorrow yet another protest. And I read at the weekend another brave Labour MP coming out and saying that he opposed these changes and wanted to see reforms. And perhaps some of the others are here to speak this afternoon to say that they too stand with the farmers in their constituency. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister and Chancellor set growth as the mission for this government. They inherited an economy growing at the fastest rate in the G7. But their choices in the budget and in this finance bill have stopped growth stone dead. They've hiked taxes, they've undermined business confidence, they've pushed up inflation and hit working people and pensioners. Later this month, we will get the economic and fiscal forecasts. But what we can already see is a Labour government committed to higher taxes, higher spending and higher borrowing, and we're all paying the price.